I love to serve. I got bills to pay. I've got a family to feed. You're not alone. Everybody in this space has that same scenario. But again, I started with serving, or that service mindset should be part of drinking water and eating every day. You're not going to be able to serve everybody. But if that's your first thought, I jump in every podcast meeting, this podcast. What am I going to do to serve today? How am I going to uplift the audience and Mark today? What jewels can I bring? What have I learned? And share it with others.
It's The Journey with drug and alcohol attorney Mark G. Astor.
Welcome to The Journey with Mark Astor. I'm your host, Mark Astor. I've spent a lot of years sitting across the table from people during some of the most challenging moments of their lives, as an attorney, as an advocate, and as someone who understands that the road isn't always straight. What I've learned is that success, recovery, and growth rarely look the way we expect them to. On this podcast, I talk with people who are willing to be honest about their journey, what worked, what didn't, and what they wish they knew sooner. So I'm super excited to have as our guest, and who has become a friend, and I'm very happy he's here. He's a much better podcaster than me, but that's okay. We're going to get into this. Steve Ramona. So Steve is a next level super connector, and I learned that from just the 20 minutes we spent a couple of weeks ago. He's created $1 billion in project impact and over $100 million in partner deals just by introducing people. Amazing. What's his signature approach? Custom video intros that make every connection personal, purposeful, and profitable. As host of the Top 20 Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast, now over 900 episodes strong and reaching 70,000 plus listeners per show. Holy smokes. Steve is a guiding voice in heart-led business growth. He also leads Together We Serve on E360 TV, where 1.6 million viewers tune in monthly to hear transformational stories from purpose-driven leaders. Steve doesn't just build networks, he's building a movement of meaningful collaboration and lasting impact. Wow. I feel a little humbled to have you on the show. But there are some interesting things. I think the first thing I learned about you when we spoke, and I think this is really important. You know, my father, who was not an educated man, he left school at 14 and my mum's 16. And when they met on a blind date and both thought the other one was very, very wealthy, it turned out they didn't have two nickels to rub together. And, you know, my father built businesses with my mother. Some worked, some didn't. Some made money. And towards the end of his life, unfortunately, Steve, he was left pretty close to broke. And that was a very hard thing to see. My dad was a proud man. But one of the many lessons he left me with is it's not what you know, it's who you know. And when we spoke, I mean, you just rattled off. When we were only, I think, talking for 15 minutes. You had like a half a dozen different people you wanted to connect me with. And I think really, if there's anything that I gathered from having my conversation with you, is that you are a master connector for other people and for yourself. Is that fair to say?
That is. I'm not a big label guy, but I've been called super connector, master connector, crazy, a lot of great things. But here's something, and let's dive into who you know. And Maya Angelou quote popped up in my head when you were talking. It's how you make them feel. I don't know the whole quote, but the end is how you make them feel. You can give them all so much money. You can give them so much. You can walk in the door. You can open the door. But how did you make them feel? Because I could open the door for somebody and say, hey, move your butt, get into the door. I just ruined a nice gesture, a nice thing of gratitude. So to show up for people, how you do that is build those relationships by bringing them value and uplifting them.
So somebody meets you for the first time and they say, hey, Steve, you know, what do you do? What do you tell them? What's your response to that?
How can I help you?
Okay. I mean, I think I would describe you as not just a master connector, but a master entrepreneur. Is that?
That's accurate. I'm very passionate about business. I'm 64. I've learned a lot over my 40 years, and I'm learning today. I don't think I started learning until I was in my late 50s, so probably 5-10 years. And audience, if you're younger than 40, be learning. If you're over 70, be learning. I don't care what age. You wake up and the first thing you should be excited about is, what am I going to learn today? Because you can take that and serve others. Everything I've learned that I shared with you when we met, I may have learned from one of my podcast guests or somebody I met on a one-on-one.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I just turned 59. I don't think I got my act together, at least professionally, until I was 49. 10, I've had this law firm 10 years. I was 49 years of age when I started this law firm out of the library. I had nothing going on. I was broke. I had nobody special in my life. And I think that the one thing you just said that really resonated with me was that I did not have a group of people that I was helping. And I tell other lawyers, what we're really here to do is to serve. And it's okay to charge for sometimes for your service. But the idea here is we are here to help people to solve their personal problems, because as lawyers we look at it as a legal problem, but it's not. It's a personal problem for the client. And I'm so happy that you said that. But it took me a really long time to figure that out.
It does. And audience, again, if you're under 40, me and Mark are going to smooth that curve out for you.
Yeah.
Because you probably get asked, I do, what would you say to your younger self? I'd say, shut up, listen, and bring value. And I've got a great principle called ASLA, A-S-L-A principle. One of my podcast guests came up with it. Was beautiful. It stands for ask, shut up, listen, and then ask. And the ask or ask questions on both ends of that. And the shut up and listen, people can't bridge that sometimes. They laugh, they smile. Hey, shut up. Aren't I listening? Absolutely not. And the image you want to put in your head is when you're in a Zoom room or a virtual room with a bunch of people on video and their screen goes black. Are they listening? Now, there's no judgment here. Maybe they're going to the bathroom. I've had to leave, get a drink of water, whatever. But if Mark is talking and I'm black screen, I'm probably away from the computer. That's why I turn the video off. I'm not really listening. I'm only using it as that image again to show you, yeah, you could shut up and start pitching people. And the person has no pain point for you to help them. Now you look like, to be honest, an idiot. And I get pitched all the time.
It's so funny you say that. One of the things that I had to learn when I first opened up the business of my law firm was how to really have a sales conversation with somebody. And the traditional model for most lawyers is you bring the client in, right? You don't pre-qualify them. You bring them in. And for me, pre-qualifying means not just that they might be a client for us, but I might be the right lawyer for them. They don't have that conversation before the client comes in. They sit them down, and for at least the first half of the conversation, the lawyer is busy telling the client or prospective client how brilliant they are, right? And how successful they've been. And the client's sitting there saying, well, that's nice, but what are you going to do for me? And see, what happens is they don't sit there and listen to the client's problem and shut up long enough to actually hear if they can actually help this person. And I had to learn that. It's part of, and I hired a sales coach to teach me how to do that. And he'd say, listen, Mark, ask a question and then just shut up and listen.
And there's a lot of noise out there, Mark. That's the problem with the world these days. There's social media and there's so much ways people communicate with us with that noise. We get fearful. We get scared. I talk to people all the time. I love to serve. I get bills to pay. I've got a family to feed. You're not alone. Everybody in this space has that same scenario. But again, I started with serving, or that service mindset should be part of drinking water and eating every day. You're not going to be able to serve everybody. But if that's your first thought, I jump in every podcast meeting, this podcast. What am I going to do to serve today? How am I going to uplift the audience and Mark today? What jewels can I bring? What have I learned? And share it with others.
Yeah, you have so much great stuff I want to talk to you about. So I'm just going to try and cover as much as I can with you. Okay, your network is your net worth. Talk about that. I love that.
Let's change that. Your network is your quality net worth. What does that mean? You can go network with and I did this for 5 years, running networking groups with people struggling, trying to make it. And now you're around people struggling. It's hard for them to help you or even help yourself. So your network should be mentors, people much more successful than you. Build relationships with them, have them part of your network. You'll be able to have access to them. I have access to probably 5 billionaires and probably 20, 100 million or more successful people. And I use only dollars because of success. I know they've done it. I know they've had the bottoms and the tops. But here's the power of serving, because everything I talk about comes back to serving. When I have a mentor like Eric Collette, who's built this great brain academy, I call it, where he helps people with Alzheimer's and done great things with them. He actually got me off diabetes medicine and lost 45 pounds with his mentorship. Now, what's cool about that? I'm healthier. That's why I love podcasts. He was on my podcast, and that's where I met him. It's a powerful tool to build your quality network. But guess what? I've shared what I've done, my story, through Eric to 20 people. And a lot of those people have lost weight, have got off medicine. So you see, I took Eric, my mentor, took his information, I took action, which is very important, and then I shared it off. And I still to this day share it off to others.
I'm so glad you used the word action. One of the things I did over the last couple of weeks is I re-listened to Think and Grow Rich. And so I listened to Think and Grow Rich, and my mentor, somebody who 11 years ago completely changed the direction of my life. If I'd never met him, I don't know, I'd probably be selling insurance or used cars at this point. He modified the book and created Think and Grow Rich for lawyers. And I think that at different stages of your career and your financial progress, the book means different things. But one of the things I got out of it was, at the end of the day, I mean, you have to take action. And if you're starting a business from ground zero, you have to take massive action. And just, lately we've decided, I want to get the business from here to there. And I'm like, I have to take massive action again. It may be different massive action, but I got to take action. Because if, I might be the world's greatest lawyer, but if nobody knows I'm out there to help them, then how do I serve and how do I grow my business?
Yeah.
And it really is about taking action. But the key is to try and take the right action, right? What's the right marketing for me? How do I reach my target audience? And that's maybe a different conversation. But that brings me to the next topic I want to run by you, which is podcasting your way to goals, which is ironic because this is sort of the second iteration of the podcast. We did it many years ago, and then I sort of got fat and happy doing other stuff. And I realized that part of my massive action to get us to the next level is going to require podcasting. So this is sort of a brand new endeavor for me. But I saw that and I was like, okay, I got to talk to Steve about that, because I know you have a kick-ass podcast that I could only hope to get to. So talk about that philosophy.
You started with, I believe it's your first podcast, Restart, right? It's the first one. Remember, I started with my first one back in January of 2023. We're all there. Elon Musk didn't just wake up and be a trillionaire. He started from ground zero. Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Cuban, one of my favorite guys I like to watch. We all start somewhere. But with podcasting especially is consistency and staying with it. Right now, the numbers are drastically terrible. After 7 episodes, 95% of people quit podcasting. You said in my bio what I've done. $100 million in partnerships. I'm closing a multi-million-dollar deal. I'll make $1 million this year. And that was tied to the podcast, building that quality net worth to a network. Take that phrase you mentioned earlier. What a great way to jump on a meeting with somebody, meeting you for the first time, and you're doing a podcast. Here's some of the things. High energy. You get to know somebody deeper than a one-on-one call or a sales call. You get to grow with them for an hour. And then at the end, most of the time they go, man, how can I help you, Steve? What can I do to help you? This was fantastic. That doesn't happen all the time. But then as you built that relationship, I can go out to these podcast guests and ask for anything I need. Like a perfect example, I need $100 million for a project. I reached out to 20 podcast guests and I got 10 emails back within 24 hours of referrals for $100 million.
That is amazing. And how do you promote the podcast?
Tell all my friends. So you starting a podcast like Mark is, and it's good for Mark. If you're starting a podcast or new, go through your contact list and reach out to everybody. Hey, everybody, I launched my podcast. Wow, right now especially. When I started, they were around, but today everybody knows what a podcast is. So the marketing is pretty simple. And I'll give you an example. I launched my podcast. A year later, I launched a newsletter with the podcast. I had 5,000 people on my contact list. Reached out to about 4,500, 500 were people, family and stuff, or weren't part of were not around. I didn't know them that well. So I took 4,500 people. I sent them all an email. Hey, I'm excited. I've launched it said quick question in the subject. I've launched a podcast. Here's my newsletter. I'd love for you to subscribe. 3,000 subscribers within a week. Data. Subscribers are data. That's gold. And to this day, I'm up to 3,600 subscribers after a year. So it works.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have about 11,000 people in our newsletter that goes out every week. But I never thought about telling them about the podcast. And I'm sure they'd want to know because we're talking about some of the stuff that applies to the founders that we work for. So I appreciate that. I just learned something.
And take the numbers with this. I know you'll jump on some other. So you have 11,000. I use a 10% rule. 1,100 subscribe to your YouTube channel. Most people have less than 100 subscribers. You just 10 times your subscriber base. Again, more eyeballs on your business and on you.
This is an interesting one I saw here. How to network correctly, right? Because I've noticed, one of my mentors used to say to me, if you go to the same networking event 3 times, and you don't get any business out of it, one of 2 things happened. Either you didn't really network or it's just the wrong audience for you. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that because it says here how to network correctly. Tell me what you mean by that and how do we network correctly?
It's a powerful tool. This is for online, in person, at the grocery store, whatever. So I've talked about be transformational, not transactional. That's the first. That's a mindset thing. Be transformational in your mindset. How can I transform this person? And then the Astor principle, of course. But here's a tip that I learned from Shelley Goldstein, who's a master speaking coach. She teaches people how to do TED Talks and all that. You walk in, when you introduce yourself, don't go, Steven Ramona, I do this, and the features and benefits of what you do. You do this. I work in renewable energy. So I would come up to Joe Smith and go, Joe, what's your name? What do you do? And he'll tell me, hey, I'm a lawyer and I work with divorcees and I've been around 20 years. That's great. That's talking about himself, which most people do. Here's what I do. I go, hey, Joe, that's great. What do you do, Steve? Joe, imagine you wake up tomorrow morning. Your computer doesn't go on. Your phone doesn't work. All your electronics are dead. What would you feel? Oh my God. I would struggle. My business would have a problem. Did you know in Spain and Portugal in 2025, the whole country went out of power? The whole country had no power for 24 hours. We solved that problem with renewable energy, finding landowners and projects, put renewable energy in, and data centers so people's phones and websites work. Did I talk about features or benefits? Did I talk about me at all? Except this is what we do. So you tell a story when you're networking with people because it's the Maya Angelou quote. How'd you make them feel? I just made Joe Smith feel scared. It's a feeling. Well, how can I, and the next thing you know, he's going to go, how can I help you? Who are you looking for? It starts generating this energy of, man, I can help, man. You are become that person that's rocked somebody's world. You haven't even talked about yourself at all.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's sort of this misnomer that when you go to a networking event, you have to meet everybody in the room. You got to speak to everybody. And I've always had the philosophy that for me, I'd rather have 2 or 3 quality conversations with people than have a 30-second conversation with everybody in the room who's probably not going to remember me anyway. And do you think that's an important part of networking and meeting the right people?
Oh, absolutely. And let's add to this because the other mindset should be people do podcasts. And I'll jump off a real quick tangent here. And it takes, sometimes it's 5 months later and they mention to me, hey, your podcast is available. Can you share it? And I do, but I've probably forgotten about it. What I do is when I do a podcast, within a week, it's out. I don't wait months. So I call value at mouth level, chin level. That's good value. You've brought value, but always thinking how I can go next level to the chin, to the nose. And when you're networking in a group, especially in person, it's great. And you meet Mark Astor and he works with lawyers, your mind should be going, and right away it's going with me. Hey, you know what? Tony over there, Mark, let me introduce you. He's a lawyer. I think you guys have a great conversation. Now, people get scared doing that because does it benefit them? Not directly, but I call God or universe, whatever spiritual is, will reward you. We just don't know how, when, or where. So networking also includes you networking other people, partnering them up together. Because again, you won't be forgotten.
I like that. Let's talk about mindset for a second. So part of my journey was I worked for a company about 11 years ago that teaches lawyers the business side of practicing law. And that's not something they teach any lawyer at any law school anywhere in the country, which is why, for the most part, most lawyers are terrible business people. And I met the founder, a guy by the name of Arjun Robbins, at a breakfast meeting that I ended up going to by pure chance. So, and after I heard him speak to a group of lawyers about being an entrepreneurial lawyer, I basically begged him for a job. But what I didn't know was that what his company really is at their core is that they are a personal growth company, and they believe that personal growth has to precede financial growth. And I'd never been exposed to that. So Arjun Robbins is basically the Tony Robbins of the legal profession. And I just, so when you talk about mindset, for most people, they're like, well, what is that? And so maybe you could talk about that, because I think that, we have, our mindset has to change, right? If I want to go from, say, a 7-figure business to an 8-figure business, I have to become the person that runs an 8-figure business, right? I can't be the person who, had a 7-figure business, or, when I was struggling and, couldn't pay my bills. I'm a different person now than I was then. And so maybe you could talk about mindset, because I think that is a very, very important subject when it comes to growing a business.
Guts. Have the guts to go up to this gentleman like you did and ask a question. Here's why. Those people are going to teach us, educate us, be our mentors. Our mindset's going to change because they're going to give you belief that you can do anything. I had a gentleman on my podcast, Rami, who's passed away, unfortunately, who, speaking of Think and Grow Rich, used Think and Grow Rich to go from 17 and homeless to a billionaire. And on my show, he literally sent $100 million to an owner. He had to leave the show because he had to take the call to take a wire. He's building a homeless city in California. I learned so much from him. His book is incredible. That's the other thing. Mindset is about personal development. I'm so confident today, which I wasn't 5 years ago, because I've learned from people, from books, from watching videos, just building yourself up. Try to get better 1% every day in personal development, and your business will grow. Your network will grow, because I have no problem going up talking to people now. Where before it's, oh, he said, I wouldn't have a billionaire on my podcast. What am I going to ask him? You ask him anything because they have a story and a message to say. What's your challenges, Ivan Meisner, founder of BNI? Millions, multi-millions of dollars, very successful. We had the greatest conversation because let's look at this in the mirror, Mark. They're human like we are. They're just labeled as successful millionaires, billionaires. That's all. Those are just labels. But you break it down to the bottom, they're human as we are. And if they don't want to talk to you, you go next.
I've read a lot about mindset, and I'm always saying to myself, okay, what separates, say, somebody from like an Elon Musk to maybe somebody like me or just a regular person? And I'm always trying to figure out what that is. And I saw an interview once with Elon Musk. They asked him about Tesla, the cars. And the interviewer said, when you started, Tesla cars, what did you think your chances of success were? He said, I figured it was about 10%. And the interviewer said, 10%? That doesn't seem like very good odds. He's like, no, the odds were terrible, but I did it anyway. And now we have all these electric cars on the road. Whether you like them or not, there's a different conversation. But the point is that, there was a 90% chance in his own mind that he was going to fail. And yet he did it anyway. That's mindset. Believing that he could do it and get it right and be successful, even with only a 10% chance, right?
The other mindset about that is you're gonna fail. Warren Buffett failed 40 bankrupt companies. He's a trillionaire. He's one of the richest guys in the world. He tell you he's failed. They've all failed. Nobody's climbed like straight up the ladder. There's always dips in that graph. Always going to be dips. How you handle those mindset wise, I think, is even more important than failures. I lost a $20 million deal in October of last year for my company, me and my partner, from things that was out of our control. I learned a lesson from one of my guests he said, Steve, be human for 24 hours. What does that look like? Pity party, eat pizza, Do an hour, 2 hour work, beat yourself up for 24 hours or less because you're going to be human, because that's a fact. It was life changing for me and my family and my partner's family. But you know what we did? We moved on the next day and found more projects for even more money.
I read a very interesting book. It was written by Michael Jordan's personal trainer, Tim Grover. And, he talks all about Michael's mindset. And I mean, but Michael and Kobe had the very similar mindset. And one of the things that Tim Grover said about Michael is that Michael didn't want to just be the best player. He wanted to be the best player ever to play the game. When Michael got done with the game, whether they won or they lost, I'd go to Michael and I'd say, okay, 5, 6, or 7, meaning, am I going to see you in the gym at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock? And Michael would shout back a number, 7. Okay, 6:55, bang on Michael's door, they're ready to go. And he said, you know what's interesting? The most successful guy on the team was also the hardest working, because at 7 o'clock when I was in the gym with Michael, you know where the rest of the team was? They were sleeping. They were sleeping. So I said, wow. And he said, Kobe did the same thing. That's mindset, right? And, I know in my own business, I mean, there have been times where, a certain marketing thing like pay-per-click would work, and I'd be like, oh, it's working. I don't have to go out and meet people. And then of course, Google changes the algorithm and things slow up. And I've noticed you have to always be trying to move forward. And there's going to be certain things that work, right? My YouTube channel is starting to work, right? But a year from now, it may stop working. And I think you always have to be evolving and paying attention and making sure that you're reaching your target audience so you can serve more people. And sometimes I've noticed that I always say, well, that stopped working. And what's really going on is that the universe is giving me a kick in the butt and saying, okay, you need to go in a different direction. And I think the biggest thing for me when growing the business was, as you said, is sometimes just listening and shutting up and listening to what the universe is trying to tell you, right? Yo, pay-per-click's not working this month. Do something else.
Yeah, that's another thing. Active listening with your universe. Absolutely. And I'm a big Kobe fan. And to back up this story, audience, you're going to love this. The Dream Team. I watched the documentary, and you probably saw it too, where Kobe is going to the gym. The rest of the players are coming back from partying. Within 3 days, they stopped partying, and they were meeting him at the gym at 5 a.m. So mindset not only affects you, but can affect others. But you actively have to work at it every day.
What Tim Grover also said is that, after Michael retired, a lot of the Bulls players, they went to other teams and they got these massive contracts. And he said, you know what? They went to play for these other teams, and the other teams were like, what the hell happened to this guy? This isn't the guy we saw playing for the Bulls. And he said, you know what happened? No Michael. No Michael, no pressure. No pressure. They just reverted back to their normal self. It was Michael who was relentless about winning and being a champion and playing as the best you could every single night.
True leader. That's a true leader.
So I really related to that. And I try to listen to those books and read those books, because I think when you don't constantly work on your mindset, it's easier to revert back into your old self. So
too much noise out there. Social media, back to that again. Too much noise. You have to deflect it.
Talk about, it says here, how to build an inner circle that grows your income. Talk to me about that, because I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, that's back to the mentors. I'm using a podcast. I think everybody should have a podcast. I know not everybody can do it. It's such an easy way to bring mentors into your world by inviting them to tell their story. Like you've invited me to tell my story. But if there's other ways, is you reach out to these people. I've got an inner circle of 3 or 4 people I meet with monthly. They're always picking my brain, how I can help them, how they can help me. Mastermind, Think and Grow Rich. That's what Napoleon Hill talked about. Mastermind. That's that inner circle where people get together and do great things. Tony Robbins, I was listening to a podcast with him. He's got 5, obviously, multi-billionaires. They meet monthly. You know what Tony says? He says, we can't be comfortable with our successes. And if you watch the video with Alex Hormozi, audience, just search it. It's unbelievable. He started coaching Alex. But what he said was, I fed 24 million people, poor people, in 23, or whatever year it was. He started to be satisfied. Hell of an event. Talk about a legacy he's leaving. But what he found was when he woke up one morning, he says, can we do more? Can we do 100 billion? And that's how you keep building that inner circle, building yourself. Because you know what he did a year later? No, so he did it in a year, 24 million, or a few years. In a year, he did 20 billion. And he just keeps leveling up.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Grant Cardone?
Oh, yeah.
I figured you would be. I learned a lot from him. I know he's sort of an out there kind of guy, but I think what I really related to him was he's in recovery, and he talked about his recovery journey, and his he's in, he's Mr. 10x, right? It's ironic, after my father died, my siblings and I got my mum an apartment, and the building it was called Altice. Now my mother lives in a 10X building because Grant moved to Florida from California, and he bought all the apartment buildings, and my mother lives in 10X. But he talks about the idea of mindset, right? He doesn't use that word, but I think when he's talking about 10X, that's what he's talking about. And he was saying, you're thinking too small, right? You don't need $100,000 a year. You need $1 million a year. You don't need $1 million. You need 10 million. He's like, you got to multiply that number. You're thinking too small, right? And he's like, well, it takes just as much effort to make 10 million as it does $1 million. So why not make 10 million? Or whatever your goal happens to be. And I really related to that, And there's just people out there who just somehow and look, he's a guy that came from nothing. His father dropped dead when he was a kid. He got into drugs. He got his head split open because he was in the middle of a drug deal. Somebody pistol whipped him, and that woke him the hell up. But here's a guy who came from absolutely nothing and has built this multi-billion-dollar real estate portfolio. And it's easy to, throw stones and criticize him, but you got to give him credit. It wasn't given to him. It wasn't.
Yep.
And I just admire people like that, like guys like Joe Rogan who have this amazing podcast. Again, Joe Rogan's a guy that came from nothing. It wasn't given to him. And I always try to look at people like that. So I don't know. When I hear your story, I put you in that light because you're just amazing. And we only have a few minutes left, but maybe with the time that we do have left, talk about something. I know that you told me that you just got this big deal done. Maybe talk about some of your recent successes and what you hope the future will look like for you.
I'm going to start with the recent successes of serving. I get multiple emails in January and December from people thanking me for spending time with them and helping them grow, bringing value, uplifting them. Those I get more and more of those every day. And then on the flip side, because of my podcast, this is why people should have a podcast, is I built my brand where people are reaching out, asking me to do things like TV shows, articles written about me, stuff I never thought would happen. I wasn't that kind of person. But building my brand of serving, he's the super connector with a servant's heart. It's a powerful legacy I want to leave. And that's, audience, how you leave that legacy. You want to build your brand because the more money I make, the more people I meet, guess what? The more people I can serve.
I like that. I do. I like that. And I think that's all really down to mindset, right?
I think service is a skill. Mindset's a skill, but service practice every day. And here's a tip for you, audience. You want to be a better service or a servant's heart? Go to grocery stores, restaurants where people have counter clerks, whatever you call them, wherever you live, and say their name twice. Tony, hey, how's your day going? Hey, Tony, thank you for packing my bags. Have a wonderful day. You will change your universe so fast. But more important, Mark, is you're impacting that person and changing their lives. A quick story. I tell people, they ask me, what do you do when you have a bad day? And I do. We all have bad days.
We all do.
I say, go serve. And so one day I took my advice, 2:00, left the office. I never do. Went grocery shopping. And in front of me was a lady with a baby. And I had this feeling, I'm going to serve her today. I want to help her. So I tell the clerk I'm in California, long hair, surfer dude, good guy. I've seen him multiple times. Dude, I asked to pay for her groceries. People do it on Starbucks and things like that. And finally he said, okay, I'll take your card. And she said, no. I said, just let me do it. It was a small amount, and she had a baby in her arms. So I pay for mine, pay for hers. We walk out together. She's tearing up. And I found her name was Debbie. I said, Debbie, what's going on? I'm so sorry. And she said, I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm crying because my husband lost his job last week. And you just bought the groceries. We didn't know how we were going to pay for it. Did I know that? No, because my mindset was service. I wanted to serve. I wanted to make that effort. And that's what saying people's names are a minimum of 2 times. If you don't know their name, ask them. Excuse me, Mark. Excuse me, I met you what was your name again? Oh, Mark. Mark, man, it's great to see you. I've never had anybody call me an a-hole for doing that.
I like that. All right, we're almost out of time. If somebody wants to get a hold of you or just find out more about you, how do they do that?
Reach out to me at stevr1961 at Gmail. That's stevr1961 at Gmail. And everything I talked about today, I have a community I built. And Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast, just search that. You'll see the blue logo with our podcast.
I love that. I love that. If you want to find out more about what we do, our main website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com, or just Google me, Mark Astor. I don't have as much content as Steve out there, but I'm working on it. So you should be able to find all of our YouTube videos, which are free and which give you the information you'll need if you want to decide whether or not you want our help. And we'll see you in the next episode of The Journey.